Okay, welcome back to Shifting Views with Willis, joined again by Rob Lewis, my innovation partner. Hi, Rob.
Hi, Wayne.
And our guest today, Joe Macon, Operation Director, Emerson Kitney, recruitment firm. Hi, Joe. Thanks for coming on the show. Also, head coach for Hull Ionions Rugby Club.
Yep.
Already immediately, that just sounds like a busy week for you. How do you separate the time?
I think we're quite good at compartmentalising things. If you speak to my wife, she always says we were like passing ships, we don't see each other very much. But I think it's just focusing works. To be fair, rugby's always been a bit of a release for me. So from work stresses or whatever stresses are in life. So I still try to use it as that, albeit with the added pressure of being head coach now, there is, I suppose, stresses to go with that job. But I suppose being able to separate and probably take lessons from both, if that makes sense, as in they're both playing to each other.
Because rugby's part of your history, right? I mean, you've been a player. You're not doing that so much now because you're in the coaching role.
Yeah.
You're working in recruitment, but was rugby really your career, trajectory? Is that really what you was looking to do?
So a bit of a plot of history. I didn't start playing rugby properly till I was lucky enough to go to a state school that played rugby union.
Right.
So my family's all football. I'm from Doncaster, for my sins. But my family's all football. Yeah, Donny, correct. My family's all football. I went to a state school which put quite a comprehensive rugby programme on, and played rugby from sort of 11 till 16 at school, but played football on a Sunday. And then the size and shape I am, quite big. I was probably a little bit more chubby then. I didn't really lose puppy fat till I was probably 17.
Should have got bigger surfers.
Should have got bigger surfers. Looked quite big on this,
you in with this mic.
But yeah, I sort of, at that point in time, I decided I'm going to give rugby, instead of playing football, again, more as a hobby, no real serious intent. And I kind of landed lucky. I played at Doncaster Knights, and at the time, they were putting together an academy, and I was moving to the Colts team, which is, from memory, above 17s. Rob might be able to say it different. Above 17s to 19s is Colts. Right. And they were putting together an academy because they were a championship side, one below the top league.
Right.
They wanted to have a feeder team through. And sort of right place, right time, if I'm completely honest. And really sort of from that point in time, rugby became a bit more serious than what it was previously. So I kind of landed lucky that I was there, and I sort of landed in that position where it became all more serious, a bit more professional, from being just a standard Colt side, which would be very much hobby-led, to being quite professional, and that there was gym sessions and proper coaching, a full-time coach, etc., etc. I was lucky enough following finishing A-levels to spend a year in Milan playing rugby, which again was a by-chance sort of meeting. A lot of things are by chance, aren't they? A by-chance meeting. There was a scrummage coach at Doncaster called Massimo Catita, former Italian international. Rob might know the name. He was doing the scrum coach at Donny. I was training with the first team, not contracted or anything, just sort of finished my A-levels summer, got asked to do the pre-season. I was having a wee in the toilet, stood next to him, and he sort of looked at me and said, "Fancy playing in Milan for a year?" And I was sort of looked back and went, yeah.
That's where the best ideas
come from. So I need a toilet. So so I sort of went to Italy for a year, come back, decided to go to uni, come to Hull, University of Hull, landed at Hull Ionions on loan initially from Doncaster, and then the rest is kind of history from a rugby point of view. So I suppose initially, no, it wasn't a career choice. Then it sort of became a career choice, and then I sort of realised coming out the back of university that I wasn't probably going to get a professional career out of it, but it was very much.
So was you studying sport at university, or
so I was again more hobby led probably. I chose to do sport because I liked it. Obviously, I work in recruitment now, and I always say to people, I don't really use my sports science degree that much. Yeah, I did sports science at uni. Chose to do that, and sort of come out the back of that and was a bit like, I'm not going to get a professional contract, but it's semi-professional, get paid to play, and I'll get a career on the side, and it sort of played quite nicely because I enjoy the community rugby spirit and enjoy sort of a drink of beer with the lads after a game and all that comes with it. So I sort of fell in love with Hull Ionions, if I'm completely honest, at that point in time, and that sort of just then become a natural path of trying to find a career next to, I suppose, playing rugby as a nice sort of, here's some money every week.
Yeah, because it's a natural, because I mean, you say that you haven't got your career as a rugby player, or certainly not your full-time career as a rugby player, but you must have gained so much from that life that's informing your career now. So almost it's a complementary skill that's informing what you do now?
Yeah, I think so. I think that there's I always say there's a lot of things you can learn from sport which you can transfer into a business situation or a work situation. Stuff like resilience, teamwork, communication skills, how to be around others, shared goals, working toward common goals, having your own goals within a team, which all play into a work environment, which quite rightly sort of set me up to do well. I think sport as a general, I think it teaches you a lot of things right from being quite young around sort of the failure and stuff like that. You don't always win, and that resilience to failure and stresses and stuff like that, which transfer quite nicely into a work situation. I was quite lucky to pick up a leadership role within Ionions when I was quite young, so I think I was 20, 21 when I picked up my first leadership role as first team captain, which I suppose put me. We have a similar situation now. Our captain's only young, and I always say to him, look, it's a steep learning curve. You'll learn a lot on the move, because you're dealing with lads who are 30, 35 who've been around the block, and I suppose that sort of, to answer your question, that sort of sets you up for some work situations, because you can't always sort of just say something and someone go away and do it. Them influencing skills of being able to sort of deal with people from different walks of life, people who've got different opinions, and very much being thrown at a deep end with that sort of that lesson of being sort of 2021 and sort of leading a team, and people around you sort of may have different ideas. Should he be captain? He's 21, and so that sort of real steep learning curve really, I suppose, taught me some valuable lessons.
Sure.
Like for me, it's the classic sport where, like, when you play football, you can have 2-3 great players, and you often win because they'll score goals. But it's very rarely true in rugby, isn't it? 'Cause it's a genuine team spirit, a team game. And obviously there's the element of danger, and you know, particularly for in the forwards, you kind of like look out for one another. So I think it's a great sort of leadership kind of thing. And generally speaking, the best teams you played in were the ones with the best leaders who people respected. And it's kind of like the army, isn't it? You'd go into the battle for certain people. I think it's very similar in rugby.
Yeah, and I think that I've always tried to lead by example. And probably my more softer, if you look at softer leadership skills, have probably developed over time. Yeah. My initial sort of go-to was to very much lead, look, I'm going to go and do this, you follow me, a bit like what you said, an army mentality. I'm willing to do it, you lads best be willing to do it as well. Follow me, we're into battle. But them sort of softer skills probably come more over time. And probably when I started picking up leadership roles in work, probably around 2018, 2019, sort of having some more formal training, and probably I was probably doing some of the stuff previous but not understanding what it meant, because you sort of, from a sporting point of view, you probably just pick it up on the hoop and no one really tells you what to do. You might get a bit of advice off someone a bit older and more wiser than you, and someone might tell you, oh yeah, try this, try that, but you don't really get any sort of, give this a go and this will work, and here's the theory behind it and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely something to be said for the, as you said, the soft education almost that you get from sport, because you learn empathy, you learn how to be a leader, you learn how to fail, you learn how to recover from it, you learn how to progress, all of these kind of things, which you don't really get from so much from a formal education. This is a life experience, isn't it? And it's interesting you touched on the army, Rob, because I think they have the similar sort of thing where they have like officers' schools, and if young officers are kind of gone up the ranks a lot quicker and they go into a squadron, and essentially they're having to command men and women that have been there a lot longer, and they're having to command them, and they have to sort of earn their respect as the leader. And there's a real challenge to being able to command them but also be in with them as part of the team, and that's a real talent, isn't it?
Doing things is actually quite hard, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you work on a project in work, it doesn't just happen because it's easy.
Yeah.
You actually have to really try.
Yeah.
And in a work environment, it often just doesn't happen because people have different conflicting priorities. But when you play in a successful team, everyone knows what they're doing. Especially like in rugby is another great example of team. People are there for a reason. They have specific jobs to do.
Yeah.
You're second row because you're big and strong and probably a bit stupid.
Yeah.
But like for me, like rugby, you have success because you worked hard at training every Saturday, and that has to happen for a whole season.
Yeah.
And that's actually really, really hard to do. And it's really hard to recreate that in a work environment because generally speaking, there's always a bit of backstabbing. Yeah. And that's what pulls rugby teams down as well, rugby teams.
It's interesting. I always think as well, like people that are in senior positions in their jobs or executives or whatever, I mean, you two are both in senior roles or been in senior roles, and most of the senior people that I know are in some way involved in sport.
Yeah.
Whether they're in cycling or in rugby or they're in football or whatever it is that they do. So do you think that's actually a key component to becoming senior in a professional world?
I don't think it's necessarily sport. I think it's something that teaches you the skills which are probably associated with sport. I think if you have a background where there is sort of resilience to stress, or there's some kind of failure early on in your in life, or you're used to failing and getting up and go again, that bounce back ability, as people term it. I think that sort of then allows you to, if you want to call it, climb the career ladder, because you don't often, I suppose, rest on your laurels, and you don't often rest on that sort of failure. You're right, okay, what can I do to get moved to the next stage? All right, it's not that resilience to stress, because it doesn't always go your way, does it? It doesn't always it's not always as perfect as you write it down on a piece of paper as a project plan or whatever you're doing in your work situation. There's always hurdles to move around. So picking up some of the valuable skills which sort of, I suppose, stand you apart from people around you, they're often linked to sport, because there's so much synergy between a sporting environment and a business one. You've always got an end goal. You've got people playing, especially team sports. You've got people playing, and even individual sports, to be honest, because now in the modern era, it's not just a cyclist paddling his bike, is it? He's got a physio, a sports scientist behind it. Even on an amateur, like you're saying there, he's got some data. He's looking at his Strava, or he's looking at his Garmin, or whatever. There's always something playing into that performance, and it's same with work. As if it's people, or if it's information, or it's data, or whatever, there's always something flowing in.
I think it seems to tie a little bit to. I mean, the reason I thought that is it seems to tie well with sort of successful people. I mean, even famous people, I don't know, like Gordon Ramsay or somebody like that. These people are like, they all run triathlons, or they're into kickboxing, or they're
like, I would say for most team sports, that if you're leading a team, you have charisma. You might not be the most skillful player on the pitch. I'm not looking at you again.
You're right, though.
You have to have charisma. People have to follow you, and for whatever reason, it's the same in the army as well. I would imagine you're not going to do what they ask you to do without having that person has to have a charisma, and that charisma that gives you success on the sports pitch also gives you success in a corporate environment as well, generally speaking.
It's almost a soft skill. It makes you more human, I guess. It makes you able to talk and navigate situations, problem solve, recover.
There's also a bit of magic saying, I mean, the amount of time that you've played an awful lot of games for Ionions, haven't you? Many of them at captain. That's a big achievement. So that's worth the qualification, isn't it? It's probably worth quite a lot of the qualifications. It's the same, like you look at people like Lewis Moody, who basically was an England rugby player. He's basically turned into a career kind of like professional guy. Never really went to commentator or anything. Like listen to Johnny Wilkinson talk. They've got these stories, and that's like it's magnetic. It's magnetic. They can talk about stuff that people see him scoring a drop goal in the World Cup. The amount of sort of mental torment he went to get to that point.
I think it's no coincidence, is it? Quite a lot of successful sports people, either at amateur level or a professional level, often become, I suppose, business leaders. I don't think it's no coincidence. I think there is, as I said, similarities and stuff you can pull from both parties to make you successful in both. But I don't think it's wholly just to sport. I think that does teach you some lessons, but I think people from other walks of life, even thinking of, there's people at our work who've done like amateur dramatics and stuff like that. Similar, obviously not sport, but a similar sort of stuff that will teach you lessons to.
I agree, because they have. I mean, you're right. When they have, say, like business events or whatever, where everyone gets together, award shows or whatever, it's usually the speaker is usually somebody from sport or somebody from like entertainment or someone who's done something interesting. And I think it's all about the story. It's like the narrative almost. When you're speaking to people in your professional, with your professional hat on, they're probably less interested in what you're talking about like what you do in recruitment, for example, and more interested in the narrative of how you got there in your life in sport. I know I come from music, so everyone talks to me about what I do in music and never talks to me about what I do in my job, because that's more interesting. And then naturally the conversation kind of leads into that, where you are now. So I think there's something to be gained from that. If you was purely just looking at it from a commercial point of view, people are always interested in the story, other than what actually you do.
And I think as well, if you're hiring in general, and it requires no set sort of qualification, I would always hire on somebody's attitude rather than the previous experience.
Yeah.
At Emerson Kidney, I'm now ops director of a sister business called Smart Temporary Solutions. We recruit trainee recruiters, and the past experiences, we're not interested in that. We're interested in the attitudinal stuff, that the softer skills, which will progress you through the business and make you good at that role. I think some of that stuff you can pull from sport, you can pull from different walks of life, or when you've sort of had opportunity to be exposed to things which will give you the skill set to do that.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly say with the Denic, we all the time we say, like, hiring different people from different backgrounds.
Yeah.
Don't just hire, quote unquote robots that fulfill an operational, they tick the boxes with X, Y, and Z. Because if you hire all the same people, they'll all think the same, and then how are you ever going to push forward and innovate?
Yeah.
You need creative, diverse minds that are coming in that have got different backgrounds, whether that's from sport or music or whatever it is that they've done in their life, because they can see things from a completely different perspective. Is it harder now with your recruitment hat on? Is it harder for employers to look at candidates that aren't ticking the quote-unquote boxes and accept them for, the wider experience that they might have?
I think it's difficult, full stop, to get a hiring process right.
Yeah.
I would say you have to make it as robust as you possibly can. Someone said to me the other day, it's like if you bought a house and took a mortgage on it, which you're going to invest, 250 grand or whatever on a house. You'd do some checks on it when you get someone around to survey it. You might do a reference on it. You might go and look yourself. You'd do everything to make sure you were investing that amount of money and you were getting some return on it, a decent place to live. Same with hiring someone into your business, be that us ourselves or our clients. I think you've got to make sure that process is robust enough that you qualify that person for either if it is a softer skill thing or if it is a hard skill. That's where often hiring processes fall down and you don't get the right result, where you probably rush it or you don't do the right checks or you don't do the interview process, or you've got to make it as robust as possible. I think it is difficult for people to see through some of that stuff. If you're hiring on attitude, how do you assess that? How do you... Some people are good at sitting and speaking to people and interviewing, and interviewing is a difficult skill to pick up and master, if I'm being honest, as in being able to ask the right questions to get the right answers, to make sure you've done the right process to get the right result at the end, which is the person sitting there doing a fantastic job. Yeah,
it's really hard. I found interviewing really, really hard work. It's just hard work. You get a load of CVs, you've got to filter them, then you've got to see them. It's really time consuming. Yeah. And I learned something. I used to work at Pfizer, and when I was having my onboarding, this guy in America, bearing in mind I was in my late 30s at the time, and no one had ever asked me this ever before in my entire career, and he basically said, look, I know where you've come from, just tell me what you like doing. And I was like, what do you mean? He said, well, what do you do at the weekend? What are you into? And we started talking about music and all this other stuff. And I put the phone down and thought, do you know what? No one has ever asked me that ever in my career. So subsequently, when I interview people, I would always ask them, what do you do at the weekend? And you meet some right weirdos, I can tell you.
He probably found more out from you from that question than he would doing a set of, I'm not saying competency-based interview questions. They do give you the information you need, but asking more, I suppose, softer questions, if you want to call them that, like that, will get you a better conversation sometimes than just sort of sitting there. And someone's got prepared answers usually, haven't they? They know what the job description says. Exactly, they can go through that job description, come up with some examples, the old STAR sort of interview question and answer, sort of situation, task, action, result. Yeah. Everyone can master that, but I think you get more out of somebody and understand what they'll be like in the workplace by probably having a bit of a softer conversation and asking a question like that. You'll probably get a better insight to what somebody might be like from a more personal point of view than you would do.
If you've got job applications out for more technical roles, so if it was something, say, science-based or in pharma or whatever it might be, I think the expectation would be that the candidate coming in probably ticks those boxes anyway. So, if they're coming for like something that's chemistry based or whatever, the chances are the fact that they're even in the room is because they fulfill the criteria of being able to do that. For me, it would become more important to speak to them about actually what defines them as a person, what they're into, their soft skills, their experience and stuff. We know you can mix formulas because like you've got the degree that kind of says that, but what we ought to know is how do you sit within this culture and how are we going to best work together with all your teammates, so to speak, and help move things forward and make this an enjoyable experience and a productive experience. Surely that would be the more important question to ask if you've kind of fulfilled the tick box. But I just wonder if particularly in senior roles or more technical roles, that's even ever really a consideration, or if it's more, can they do the job?
Yeah.
Do they fulfil the criteria?
Yeah, and I think I think people do get overhooked sometimes on what the technical requirements are and asking technical questions.
Yeah.
If someone's got a degree and they've got a level of experience, they probably could do the job with their eyes closed a little bit. It's probably more how they fit within the team, the culture, the business, and how they fit on probably more of a team level, and how they're going to impact, I suppose, that dynamic than they would do from a technical point of view.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's always worth. Well, we always recommend you reference somebody and get some probably technical reference saying, yeah, they are who they say they are.
Yeah.
Because often people do lie.
Sure.
People do put stuff on the CVs that doesn't exist and you haven't got.
I'm not really a surgeon.
That's a dangerous one, but yeah, come and you come. Just open me up. But yeah, people often do lie. But I agree, there has to be some level of, I'm asking you some questions about you and how you're going to fit. I think that's for both parties as well. I think we always say now it's a two-way interview process, and often the candidate's interviewing you as well.
Yeah.
The person going for the job is often interviewing their employer, because I think I read something the other day that for under 35s, culture is sometimes more of a priority than pay is.
Yeah.
So the actual culture of the place is actually more important than actually how much it says on the paycheck each month. Obviously, everyone's got a standard of living to go live to, but sometimes they often prioritise that. Oh yeah, it's nice to work here. It's good culture. Is often more important than actually what the.
Yeah, because I do. I mean, we talk about it all the time in terms of culture, but I think the sort of paradigm has shifted. Like, people aren't just purely focused on getting what's the salary, what's the bonus, what's my progression, whatever. Not that those things aren't important, but it's not the sole.
Yeah.
It's where they're living, where are they going to be located, what is the community like, what's it going to be like going to work every day, are there ideas listened to, do they get opportunities to put ideas forward, are they going to be shot down if they come up with something, all of these elements. I think when you go for an interview in a business, it would immediately be reflective of the culture of that business, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Actually, if they weren't asking you those questions to say, well, tell me about you other than what's on the CV, like, what have you got? Who are you?
I've told you this before, but when I moved from a certain company to another company, I won't say this because we do have some friends at these places still. And when I went for my interview, the company I was going to, I was moving from a company that was quite laid back and like very people focused to a company that was very delivery focused.
Yeah.
And when I had my interview with the lady in their HQ, she was literally said to me, look, apologies, Rob, but I've actually got something really urgent I'm dealing with, so I'm going to be on my laptop while I'm interviewing you. And she was literally dealing with some issue.
Wow.
And while she was interviewing me, and I was like, well, it's a little bit rude, but
Yeah,
she was
yeah.
actually a really nice person, so she wasn't being rude. But it just like, shows you what the culture of that organisation was. I haven't even got half an hour to interview. I've got to do this email, and I'm not going to interrupt that. It's just really interesting, isn't it? One of the things we would talk about in innovation as well as culture is the value of thinking differently.
Yeah.
And fundamentally, when you recruit someone, you're looking to tick some boxes to make sure that they've got the right degree.
Yeah.
They've worked in the same sector. You probably like people who are a bit like you as well, personality-wise. So it really standardises what you're recruiting.
Yeah.
Do many people actively recruit people who are different, got different background, different personality?
Yeah. For me, it goes one way or the other. I think you often get a business what you've just described, which is very much I recruit what I like. I recruit for a skill set. But you often get businesses who say, right, I don't want people from the same industry. I want someone who's transferable in, because I know they're going to come in and say, well, this other place we do it this way, and challenge the way of thinking, which I think is always healthy, because you get the same person. You get robotics, don't you? You get, we do it this way. Everyone follows the lead, and we don't want to change. Whereas if you get that, I suppose, that innovation culture where you're open to ideas, the business will move forward. Yeah. So I think you either get it one way or the other way, Rob. You either get people who, and I don't think there's really ever any middle ground. You either get a person who's really open to transferable people, be it they have to have a certain level of competency to do the role, but they're open to different sectors, different industries, all that kind of stuff. Or you get somebody who says, I must have X, Y, and Z, and if you don't find it, then don't bother, sort of thing. As in, don't bother putting them in front of me, I'm not interested.
Yeah, I said, like, my background's in pharma, as you know, but it's very much, you have to have a degree in science. We prefer people who've worked at certain companies. But what it means is those people move from one company to another, and it's literally merry-go-round. People move from, I'll bring my team in. It's just a cycle. And consequently, they're all doing the same, they're all running the same projects, because the ideas are just going around the pipe. So it's crazy, really crazy.
Yeah. Well, like you said, I don't think it stifles things more than actually grows it, doesn't it? I think you don't get much sort of forward thinking by just I suppose, like you say, go around the merry-go-round, hire the same people, hire robots.
Yeah. But I think that comes from the leadership, doesn't it? Like that. I mean, the big leaders, particularly in pharma, you know, the very senior leadership. Because if it's really a case of hiring people to fulfill, you know, to make more pills or whatever it is, because that's their market. You know, they need to keep producing.
Come on, Wayne, there are other ways to innovate.
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah, but speaking specifically for pharma, you know, essentially to produce their products, get out on the market, they need people to fulfill that criteria who've got the skills to do that, and probably a less concerned about whether they've got cool ideas or whatever, because they're sort of it's not really what I need. I just need you to make that formula so that it goes out there and they.
Well, I think the sad fact is most of those leaders have been through the same pipe, so they're just perpetuating the same system.
Yeah.
And fundamentally, it's a really successful sector anyway. So generally speaking, they make loads of money, regardless of what they do.
Yeah.
So they're not on a burning platform.
But this is the danger of innovation, isn't it? I mean, this is what we're talking about, because you're so happy with what you're doing, you're so successful in the area that you're in, that anything that comes in that disrupts that or challenges that, be recruiting people outside of that world, probably sounds a little bit scary to some industries.
Yeah. And probably often get frightened by that, as in challenging that norm can be frightening in terms of getting outside of that comfort zone and into something new. And if that's a top-down thing, as in the leadership think, oh, well, we should hire this type of person, that gets then cycled down to the manager, cycled down to that manager, and all of a sudden you've got everyone who's the same, your merry-go-round, going round and round, and you don't get anybody different. You just get the same old. But I suppose, like you said, Rob, if it's a successful model and it works, then
it's hard to push.
It's hard to push and hard to change, isn't it? You're probably fighting a losing battle a little bit because, we make money, why would we want to? This works for us.
So for you, working in recruitment, do you find are you faced with challenge if you put forward candidates that don't, or would you put forward candidates that don't meet the brief, but you say to this person, look, we've spoken to this person, actually, they've got some credible stories, some credible experience, doesn't quite tick the boxes that you're asking for, but actually I think it's completely transferable. Yeah,
and I think that's the beauty. Us as a recruitment agency, we meet everyone face to face. So we want to know the story behind the CV. Often you get what I would call CV slingers thrown off at the wall, up some sticks sort of thing. But we really want to, both ends, we really want to understand the client and what they're after, so the business. And then we really want to understand the candidate and what their career goals are, what culture-wise, what they're looking for, what drives them, what motivates them. So really we'll put them in the right place. And often we always say the CV doesn't tell a full story. Like I was saying earlier, experience, isn't it? Unless you're lying, you should be able to do the job if you've got a level of experience. But we will often, what we call curveballs, which we will often put into shortlists. So we always go back to the client and present a shortlist of CVs to talk through and discuss the reasons why. Again, a traditional recruiter might just send a CV and say, have a look at this. And often you get hiring managers who say, well, don't meet this, don't meet that. You haven't listened. But we would go back and explain the reasons why. So when we do put a curveball forward, and that's often the case, we do have curveballs, we would explain the reasons why. Because there might be something hidden, they might have a certain personality, skill set, culture that might lead into the role. They might have shifted industries previously and done a really good job doing that. There could be all sorts, but I think it's the level of understanding to be able to do that. Like Rob said, recruitment's quite time consuming. I don't think people realise the sort of the effort the time spent and actually trying to recruit somebody is.
Yeah, I've certainly experienced that. There's people who are recruiting, so they're in a leadership role and they've been tasked with recruiting someone to a department or whatever. And actually, they're probably the wrong person to be recruiting people, because really they don't know what they're looking for themselves. So they kind of fulfill a job brief, which they think ticks the box of, well, we think we need X, Y, and Z. But they don't really know what any of that kind of means. And then whoever gets put forward by, say, a recruitment agency, whatever, they'll say, oh, okay, well, let's pick out of them three. Do you come across that much, or are you finding that the people that are recruiting, they have the knowledge, they know what they want?
Again, I think there's a bit of both. I think people, because of the market conditions over the last 3 or 4 years, there's had to be a level of flexibility from an employer point of view. Because there's been record number of vacancies. I think middle of 2022 there was probably 1.5 million vacancies live in the UK. And then unemployment was 4%, so there was actually less people unemployed. And obviously, other than unemployed people, you get long-term unemployment, people who aren't working at all and couldn't fulfil them vacancies anyway. But you've basically got more vacancies than there is people to fill them. So people have had to be more, I suppose, flexible in the thinking of what good looks like and what can we do with the resource that's available to us, and can we train people? Can we bring them in? But you will always get people who are very hard-nosed with it and say they must have X, Y, and Z. And for some roles, that completely makes sense.
Yeah.
Because there is roles where you do need X, Y, and Z to fulfill it. But there is a lot of roles out there, particularly within softer skill marketplaces, where just looking at experience alone really does shorten your market and shorten the availability of talent for you. You're probably missing out on people that could do a fantastic job for your business by just having a closed mindset to what good looks like. And
I mean, yeah, because there's obviously very technical roles where you need people. You know, if you've got a doctor or a pilot or something, like, okay, well, you're going to need to do that because it's important. But even in that world, I mean, airlines or other industries are recruiting people that don't have that experience, and essentially they train them they invest in them for 2 years or whatever it is to give them the skills, and then they're essentially bringing them in, not only giving them the technical skill to do the job, but they're kind of bringing them into the culture of the business, so that person is growing with the business. And maybe that's a nice way to kind of ensure you have a strong employee culture by kind of, taking a rookie, so to speak, and teaching them your ways.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but when you throw a curveball, as you call it, to one of your clients, are there industries that are more receptive to that than ones that wouldn't be, that would completely flat out decline it?
I don't think so. I think it depends on the business and their situation. We always say it starts at the beginning. If you have a thorough conversation at the beginning with a client and sort of outline what is wanted and challenge with a small c, what that looks like, you can often get them curveballs in, no matter who the client is, because you can bend the brief, as I would call it. Bend the brief of what they've given you. And you can be, not cheeky, but you can sort of use your skills as a recruiter to find something that doesn't completely fit, but in essence sell that person because you believe that they're right for that role. But I don't think there's any particular industries which are that do and don't do it. I think like you often get, as we just spoke about, technical roles, obviously they want a level of competency because often you need a level of competency in technical skills to do the role. I think in more sales and maybe even marketing arenas, there often is a case to be a bit more flexible because you can be more creative in the marketing role. Sales is more of a personality sort of softer skills approach. So does cold hard experience really matter? Again, I would argue probably not. It's probably more the attitude and the makeup of the person rather than what they've done previously.
We was talking a couple of weeks ago about, I think you mentioned it, was it the MI5, MI6 thing, the type of people that they bring into like code break and solve problems and stuff like that. And these are not typically traditional trained spies or whatever. They're just people that think in a certain way and are able to...
Yeah, so it's that whole thing, we did it for the MBA course, didn't we? But about hiring people in neurodivergent, so like GCHQ and MI5, like people who are autistic or dyslexic for their different thinking. And obviously Dominic Cummings, he famously brought in a load of people into the cabinet office with an advert saying we want weirdos and misfits, didn't he, or something? That didn't obviously work out too well for any of us. But it's quite interesting, isn't it, to those people who go to that extreme. I mean, obviously what Dominic Cummings did in terms of Brexit and the election and stuff is, you can have a view on that. I won't bother saying what mine is. But I did quite like the way that he was breaking down the traditional route and sort of saying we do need people to think differently because like government is such a it's again like the right school, the right university, going to
traditional
government. And so I do actually think he has something quite interesting to say about that. But
he got the outcome as well, didn't he? He got the outcome he wanted by doing that approach to it.
Totally,
Obviously, he wanted Brexit, and he again within government he wanted certain things to happen, and he got what he wanted. And obviously had a team behind him doing that. So no matter what your political view is,
exactly.
He's quite successful at what he did by doing that.
Completely,
Those are good examples because whilst they're extreme examples, essentially you're taking quite hierarchical, strong, traditional industries and then injecting them with people that typically wouldn't imagine being even working in that world, working in the civil service or government or MI5 or whatever it might be. And naturally they're going to come in with this whole different perspective, idea, culture of their day job. And I just wonder if more traditional industries would evolve to be open to that, like, say, the pharma industry.
I think it'd be amazing. I mean, like, generally speaking, every time you get a new job, it's usually because you're getting some form of promotion. So on day one, you always have a bit of imposter syndrome. I said I could lead a team. I've never actually done
Yeah.
that. I've now got 30 people reporting to me.
Really
So
gonna
you
see
always
the
have that,
CV here.
that little bit of imposter
Yeah.
syndrome.
Yeah.
But you manage to cope with it, don't you? And I think it would be the same if you went into a new sector.
Yeah.
You know, generally speaking, you probably get by quite well. And I think it would really help in terms of bringing new thinking. You know, I'm not saying you replace everyone with a bunch of Dominic Cummings weirdos and misfits, but you know, I think it would be quite cool to throw in a few curveballs.
Yeah.
And we used to talk about it all the time. And I met Wayne from when I was at Reckitt, and someone said I should meet him because they were in a band and they were from the arts, and I was quite interested in how we could use people in the arts in innovation in healthcare. I mean, we never actually got to do anything, so I didn't stay that much longer after them. But I probably wouldn't have got permission.
Didn't get that gig.
I probably wouldn't have got permission anyway. But I do think there's something really interesting about connecting with different types of people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's quite cool.
You can learn a skill, and you can learn as long as you've got the right makeup, you can learn skills and sectors and industries.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
again, that was my point earlier around. I'd much rather hire someone on an attitude basis than I would on a cold hard skill.
Yeah.
Obviously, some roles you need skill to be successful, but I'm a big believer in you can teach. If someone's got the right, I want to go and do it, and the right makeup, you can teach anybody. Not saying anything, but most things.
For the most part,
most
yeah.
things.
I think
There's a
the
level of intellect to some things, but
The logical conclusion of this is Hull Ionions are going to have a netball centre playing scrum half next year. I look forward to that.
Yeah.
I'll come and watch that one.
Yeah. So recruitment today then, so you're at a senior level now because you're leading recruitment.
Mm-hmm.
What does it look like? You've touched upon earlier on that there's a productivity discussion that's going on. There are a lot of vacancies, not as many people are fulfilling those vacancies. What do you see that's going on the ground? What's happening in the workforce?
I think there's obviously been a series of events which has led to where we are now. Obviously, we subscribe to and we contribute to a report called by the REC, which is the Recruitment Employment Confederation, and KPMG do a monthly report called the Report on Jobs, which is a labour market report and gives you several stats around candidate availability, number of vacancies out there, salaries, what sectors are in demand for staff, and then what sectors are sort of struggling to find people. What you've seen probably over the last, since probably coming out the back of COVID when it all went a bit crazy, and all of a sudden we went from nothing to 100 within the space of a couple of months. What you found was people were hiring left, right, and centre, probably due to the offset of the demand then being all of a sudden pushed on everybody.
Yeah.
Everyone switched off, and then all of a sudden we're back on again.
Yeah.
And what you found was employers wanted people. So as I mentioned earlier, record number of vacancies, 1.5 million, I think there was at one point, most ever. And I think in February 2020 there was about 800,000 vacancies. So you've almost doubled in a couple of years. And then what you found on the other end, on the candidate availability perspective, was people were sticking rather than twisting because of the series of events. You had Brexit, which sort of compounded the fact on the availability of staff on more of a semi-skilled and unskilled point of view.
Yeah.
You had that to start with, then you had COVID and people getting put on furlough and then having some loyalty to their companies because they looked after them during a difficult period of time. Then you had a cost of living crisis. So you probably had 3 or 4 things, bang, 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 which has led to candidates probably being less secure and more safe, so sticking rather than twisting.
Yeah.
So these vacancies have been left unfilled from a point of view that obviously people are, and then throw in the mix, someone hands a notice in, there's a big counter offer sat there for you. We don't want to do the recruitment process and find the same thing as everyone else is finding. Here's an extra 10 grand, please stay. Yeah. So there's been a number of things going on which has made it difficult to attract, recruit and retain probably talent, both locally in the Humber region and probably on a national basis.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's just down to that. I think there's obviously been a lack of investment on a foundation level for a number of years in getting youngsters and people, school, college, university, into courses which are future courses.
Right.
So this might have started, this is me speaking anecdotally without any data, but back in the 90s, there probably was an underinvestment in sort of that kind of, right, what technical skill sets will we need in 20 years' time? Yeah. And then
it's like skills of the future.
Skills of the future. And I think there's always conversations about that now. What will the jobs be in 2040? I imagine it'll be more sort of technology-led than it will be anything else.
I think it's a really interesting area because, like, my eldest started university last year, my other 2 go this year, so I'm quite acutely aware of what they're going to be studying and stuff. But, like, it's just so arcane, the education system, and it won't change quickly. But you've got people like Ewan Blair has that company called Multiverse, where basically teaching people data science, teaming them up with smart young tech companies. It just seems like the way forward to me. And they're actually getting paid something like 18 grand to do those courses. So it's completely disrupting the way you would do that. Unfortunately, my kids have got no interest in data science, stuff like that. But hey, but like to me, that's what we need to be looking at, isn't it? And
well, I agree. I think for me, if I had my time again, I'd probably do an apprenticeship or a degree apprenticeship or something along those lines where I was learning something while working. I think that's probably the best. Again, speaking anecdotally without any data to it, but I think that's probably the best mix of you got some on-the-job stuff going on, whereas there's probably some theoretical learning going on as well. But I think there's probably been an underinvestment in that forward thinking of, and it's probably it's a government policy thing of thinking, right, where do we need to be? And you're probably seeing the effects of that now. I always say my background recruitment-wise is engineering. I always say there's a gap between people with leaving university graduate-wise and probably 5 years experience to the more experienced people who are coming towards the end of their career. There's probably a 10, 15-year gap of skilled engineers. And that's like design engineers, product development engineers. There's a big, and even more hands-on people like maintenance engineers, there's a big gap of people where you think there's probably been at some point some underinvestment in apprenticeships or degrees or... But to answer your question, it's a multifaceted thing that's going on. I think we're starting to come out the back end of it. The number of vacancies is coming down, the candidate availability is going up, but I don't think the skills shortage and the talent shortage will fix itself overnight. A bit like you said, Rob, I think it's a more complex problem to change the education system than just saying we're done.
Yeah, because there is a push, isn't there, on, I mean, particularly I've certainly noticed there's really a push on the narrative around apprenticeships. That's something that really gets pushed heavily. And you're right, because of all the benefits that it has, it's not just learning on the job and getting paid and making money and all that kind of stuff, but also experiencing the real world culture of that career, which it might well be that you do an apprenticeship and think, actually, do you know what, that's just not for me. I don't like working outdoors or whatever it is that you're doing as part of that thing. And there's probably no better way to learn how to do that than to be there and do it, and all the academic qualification in the world doesn't really put you out there physically doing it. So I think there's something to be said for that. But certainly the skills of the future, that is something that needs a lot of focus. And I do actually think there's a narrative on that now where there is more talk around that, where saying, naturally, I think when like AI became a very prominent thing all over the media, naturally the conversation is around what are the jobs of the future. We're all going to have our jobs replaced. AI's coming. Who's going to do it? And so there's more narrative around it. But it feels like it takes some significant jerk or significant event to make that
push things forward.
Yeah. So you mentioned Brexit, the pandemic, or a war or whatever it is, something that goes on, and they go, now we have to rethink because this significant event has happened. And maybe there needs to be a more flowy way of legislating around education and work and all that kind of stuff.
I think going back to your point around learning on the job, I think for anybody, I always say when with pre-pandemic, we used to do quite a lot of talks at the STEM events at Hull University, and I always used to say get as much experience in the workplace as you possibly can as a degree person, because I always hear the same thing from people leaving university and interviewing probably best part of 1,000 people over the last 8 years. You always hear the same thing when it's a graduate who's got probably a year of experience. I've learned so much more in this first year in work than I ever did at university. Even if university you're just working in a shop or in anything which gets you some interaction in a, like you said, in a proper workplace. It's the same as rugby. I always say to people coming out of junior rugby, I think the academy setup's flawed, if I'm completely honest, from a premiership point of view. I always say to kids, you need to get as much exposure to senior rugby as possible, because nothing sets you up to play senior rugby like senior rugby.
Exactly.
But it's a bit like the workplace. Nothing sets you up for the workplace like the workplace. It seems simple, but it's the outcome. And I don't know how the skills of the future. I don't know how you get that nice mix of getting people, because there's some bright young people out there, getting them in work, but also giving them the theoretical knowledge to succeed longer term.
There's a balance there in terms of if you're looking at the culture of organisations, going back to the point we were saying earlier on, if you was to bring in different thinkers into traditional organisations and you was to challenge them with rethinking the way that that product is made or the service or whatever it is they do, challenge the way that that's done, incorporating what they know now about technology, what they know now about what's going on in the world culturally or whatever. Maybe like you would almost get a culture of that. You know, they can't learn on the job because that thing doesn't exist yet, but their approach to how they might do that would be more commonplace.
Yeah.
You know, if traditional industries hired non-traditional people, if you like, you know, maybe there could be something in that world.
Yeah, more partnerships like the Aura building, which is obviously taking very bright minds out of university and commercialising products.
Yeah,
is probably something that needs to continue or more of, where you're sort of pulling on some bright minds which are future thinking, and how do you commercialise that to make it more business worthy or monetize it? And it's a complex subject which, like you said, I don't think you solve these kind of things overnight, do you? I think for me the whole education system's a bit flawed in its approach, that in essence you only get your funding at school wise if you achieve certain grades, and you get a certain amount of money for certain people, and driving it by money doesn't necessarily get you probably the outcome that you need. And university, and like, I imagine they get a certain amount of funding depending on what grades you get or and how many pupils you have. And
yeah, I mean, I would say, I think the education system is incredibly flawed. I think it's hugely flawed, and it's built on a system of working from many decades ago, really, that is just not really a 21st century world and the way that we're heading. I'm not saying education is bad. I think education is good, and it is a good part of growing up, but it's as much about learning the soft skills of education as it is about the academic stuff. But it seems to be that there's still this traditional approach of essentially teaching you to become a good worker to get a job, and this is how you do it, and you need these tick boxes in order to do that. And I remember when I was at school and we did work experience, they would just slot you in anywhere. I mean, I'm all for work experience, but they put you in anywhere. And it's like, okay, you're going to the bank, and you're going to, there's no like, well, what do you want to do or whatever. It's just like, go out there and work for a week, and that's what it is. But I think in terms of addressing shortages, especially in crucial, critical industries, I don't understand why these things aren't introduced into school at a much earlier age. So people training to be, say, doctors, nurses, infrastructure engineers, whatever it is that we feel needs to power the country that makes us, move forward. I almost say it like cadets. Do you know when kids go to cadets, to be a pilot in the RAF or whatever? Why is that stuff not introduced at a really early age in education, where we say, look, trial some of this stuff, take part in some of these courses and things, and see what it feels like to be an engineer or a doctor or whatever,
I think it's difficult because you don't want to limit somebody to a certain career path at such an early age, but you've also got to, I think, I'm not going to be quoted on this, but I think in Italy they have a similar system where I think at like 13, 14 you choose what you want to be. I go to art school or I go to science school or whatever, and you focus more on that with some underlying other education going on. It's a fine balance in it of opening up people's minds and youngsters' minds to enough, but also thinking, right, okay, from my country perspective, where do we go and what do we need? And it's difficult.
What I don't suggest is, you kind of say, okay, choose to be which profession. I'm not suggesting that. I'm more suggesting that you open. We had in a podcast we did a few weeks ago, we was talking about the health service, and we were saying actually a lot of people wouldn't try to be a doctor because they feel it's completely out of their reach. They're not from that world. They grew up on a council estate in Hull. They don't have great qualifications. They don't have any money. No chance. Doctor's another world to them. And I just think, well, it's not. The technology and all these things exist actually now for more people to be able to work in that world, because it's a different industry. And I'm just saying, maybe exposing people to the opportunities to be able to do, you could do this, you could do that. And we've got this module on, health training 101 or whatever it is that you can take part, which you can, you cannot choose to or not do. It's not a forced thing. It's just saying, instead of like work experience, it's a series of like industries. Maybe you go through several of them, and you spend, as part of your schooling, it's almost like your schooling is an apprenticeship. You have your education, and during that education you spend 50% of that time in different industries, being exposed to those things.
And I'm a big fan of Ron Deering College, if I'm completely honest, the way they go about things. It goes back to my point earlier. I actually worked in a school for a but after leaving uni for a period of time, for 3 years. And so I've seen the sort of inside of how it works, and I think it's all driven by, especially at GCSE level, around just passing your English and maths.
Yeah.
They aren't really, as long as you pass your English and maths,
Yeah.
they aren't really fussed about, well,
Yeah.
all right, that's probably a bit extreme, but that for the
It's
school,
their focus
that's
point.
their focus point,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that's what they, and it's by no means their fault, because that's what they're judged on. They're judged on how many people get a old school a C or above in maths and English.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's pushed now, isn't it? I mean, the government, they want you studying mathematics till you're 18 or whatever it is now, whatever the new rules are. But I'm not particularly saying that's a bad thing. It's good that people understand mathematics, and are literate and all the rest of it. The basics of being human, I suppose, in a Western world. But I've too worked as a teacher and as exam invigilator and been around that world. And the panic around those kids scoring, the right grade or the right number at the end of their thing, because it rests on their league tables and it reflects on the teachers and the senior team and then Ofsted and all of this stuff. And there's been lots of discussion around the Ofsted thing this last year, hasn't there? But, all of this. So it's all markers. It's, are you achieving your marker, rather than are you producing good, experienced, skilled people that are going to go out there and make a difference to the country or advance things forward. Now, I accept that's a fine balance. I'm certainly not preaching that one should, I know the answer. I'm just saying, I think it's just a bit archaic, the existing system, and it's not really evolving quick enough to prepare for those jobs of the future.
I completely agree. I think, like I said, I think the system's a bit outdated. It probably needs a refresh, but will that happen? As you suggested, Rob, it's government policy, isn't it? I think the problem we've got is we're a democracy. Things change every 5 years. It's a bit like we were speaking before we come on film about the heating industry, and depending on who's in charge and even what minister is sat in that cabinet office or whatever, it will depend on what the policy is and what comes out the other end. So even within a particular party, it's all sort of driven, and that's probably a bit defeatist. But there probably needs to be more thinking around how do we fix a skills shortage. I don't think Brexit was properly thought out from a point of view of, right, okay, we're going to limit the number of workers coming into this country. What impact will that have on the whole ecosystem of the labour market? Because what you found was people like Amazon getting delivery drivers and paying them as much as you'd pay probably a skilled person to do an engineering role, and saying, here's 35 grand to drive an Amazon truck round and deliver parcels, and we'll give you £1,000 if you stay 6 months at one point in time. HGV drivers, remember that shortage? 50, 60 grand for HGV driver to drive it. I'm not saying drivers don't do a great job. I'm just saying in the level of sort of investment to try and get and fix that problem of, I don't think anyone thought that out. I don't think it was ill thought.
Of course it was, and it's in loads of industries, and social care was a big area, where we have a lot of European workers that were over there really keeping that infrastructure alive, and then as soon as you start moving them along and say, well, look, we haven't got the capability to fulfill it for all the reasons we've kind of just discussed in terms of, preparing for that, the jobs in the future. We've been so reliant on other people being able to do stuff, and then if you stick a wedge in that and say, well, now we're not doing that, Brexit definitely is an elephant in the room, I think, and I think there's going to have to be in the future, from a worker's point of view, some more realignment with the EU in terms of it's good for both of us. And also the just the ability to travel between, that whole thing of being able to go work in France or go work in Spain or whatever. There's a whole cultural richness to it, which you can bring back to your country. I mean, it all seems very logical to me. Away from the political side, whatever it is the country votes, but sometimes it's like cutting off your nose to spite your face.
Completely, yeah.
Do you know what I mean? You think, but you're harming us, as much as, what we're not really gaining. So what does it look like moving forward? Do you feel confident in the recruitment industry now? Do you feel confident in the workforce? Are we going to come out the other side stronger?
I think so. I think if we continue on the path we are, I think we will do. I think it's starting to even itself out. It's been very much what you call a candidate-driven market. Candidates had options, so numerous. It wouldn't be rare if somebody had 4 or 5 offers at one point in time from 4 different companies, and they'd have a choice of, right, And that's really where we really speak loudly around getting your employer value proposition and your employer branding right and all that kind of stuff, that you are really attracting these people. Yeah. And the culture surrounding that. I think people think culture just means getting yourself a table tennis table or a pool table and some nice comfy sofas.
Some nice beanbags.
Some nice beanbags, correct, yeah. But I think there needs to be, particularly in the SME market space, a lot of work around that employer value proposition, the employer branding, and really how you stand out in the crowd. Because, yes, it will get better, and obviously it'll ebb and flow, as it always does. Naturally, when a recession comes along, you have redundancies and there's more workers than there is jobs. But I think that won't be as, because of the reasons we spoke about, that when these recessions do come along, as they do every few years, I don't think it'll be as hard hitting as it has been previous. People often talk about 2009 and the number of people out of work then. But I think there has to be work, particularly around that, right, what are we about? How, if you wanting to attract top quality talent and move your business forward, you really do need to be sort of selling yourself and saying, this is who we are, this is where we're going. Because like I said earlier, especially for young people, so as I mentioned, people under 35 are often choosing culture over the money. So if the culture's not right and that value proposition isn't there for them, then unfortunately they'll choose the other one of the other three or four offers they've got on the table at that point in time.
There's something around place though as well, isn't there? You know, in where you live and where, you know, a lot of people relocate to get particularly good jobs, you know, and they'll move to another city or whatever. But there's something around that, like what role your organisation plays, particularly if you're a large organisation, what role it plays in that community in terms of, yes, the person's come to work there, but what it's like for them to be there in terms of society, social, schooling, whatever. And I think significant organisations can have a big role in, you know, affecting what that community is like, you know, by investing in resources and creating situations and clubs and things like that, where it becomes not just it's great to work for us and we're going places and this is our vision, but also we want our people to have good lives, you know, and that's why we invest in X, Y, and Z and push in those sort of areas.
Yeah, and I think that social value piece is becoming big on the agenda, especially within bigger businesses. That piece around how do we give back a little bit and sort of investment in, be it clubs or whatever, and making the community better, or getting involved in colleges and schools and sort of not manipulating the curriculum but influencing it and helping it, and that talent pool coming through. I think people need to start thinking a bit more longer term or businesses do a longer term to their talent planning, rather than we need someone here and now. Because like I said, that shortage will be around, especially around skilled talent. That shortage will be around for a while. I don't think we're going to solve that just by having, I suppose, more migrants coming in. I don't think we're going to solve that. But I do think by, like you spoke about, that social value piece and giving back and investing in the community and getting involved in initiatives will water your seeds and they'll grow. But I don't think enough is being watered to see it grow. We need to be very conscious that there is a lot that needs to be done to that future talent piece to grow it.
It's like what you said about the UTC and Hull, for example. Because obviously a number of businesses are behind that, aren't they? And they do make that effort to plant those seeds, but it's relatively few compared to the overall education system, isn't it?
If the last few years have taught us anything, is there are going to be shocks as well, and we're going to see more of these shocks in some form or other. Whether that's you know more to do with whether it's a pandemic or something, or it's something to do with war or legislation. I mean, there's stuff happening. You only have to watch what's going on in the world, and so the knock-on effects there'll always be a knock-on effect to businesses and supply chains. So they have to sow your seeds, so to speak, rather than kind of resting on the laurels of this is what it is and we're happy. You know, things are going to move, and you're going to have to be able to move with it. And the nature of the people and where you're recruiting those people, and the next generation of those jobs, you need to be thinking about now.
And I think it's the next generation of talent as well, and thinking what that looks like. I think I use the word flexibility a lot, because no two persons are the same. I think if you go back 30, 40 years, then you would get probably a uniformed workforce who just come to work, do the job, go home. I think now, obviously with different generations and all that blending in, you've got to think around what am I offering? As I said earlier, what's my value proposition to this pool of talent. How am I going to stand out? What am I offering? I think there's no one size fits all. You've got to have a flexible approach to what you are offering and how you build that culture and how that all plays in and what you're rewarding people with. What's the workplace like? Do you relocate? What's the place like? It's quite multifaceted to get it right. And I think the more flexible of approach you can take, the wider scope of talent you're going to open yourself up to. If you're very rigid in your approach and we work 9 to 5 and there's no flexible working and you're closing yourself off, because there will be people who want to work 9 to 5, but there'll also be people who want to work 7 till 3, or there isn't that 9 to 5 work anymore. There isn't that sort of, right, we start at this time, we finish at that time. People like flexibility. Some people like security, but you've got to have that flexible approach to capture everybody. Yeah. And I think if you're rigid as a business, you may fall behind in probably attracting people to the roles you're recruiting for.
Yeah. From a recruitment consultant point of view, what would your advice be? Could you give like a top tips to someone, a candidate, so someone looking for a role and an employer seeking a candidate? What are the overall guidebook things that they need to be aware of?
Yeah, I think it's all around, for me, outreach. And what I mean by that is, rather than just sending your CV from a candidate perspective, pick up the phone and have a conversation with whoever, or reach out, be that via LinkedIn, be that via email, personalise something. There's a lot more to somebody than just what reads on your CV. Yeah. And if you are going for something which is a little bit out of what you've done previously, them sort of touch points will be more important than others. But I would recommend that to anybody, be that from a graduate level through to a senior person. That outreach and sort of being proactive will stand you in good stead. And I think, again, probably similar on the other front as well. Don't judge a book by its cover. Yeah. Have a flexible approach. Consider things which are outside the norm or what you think is good and what good looks like. Because you'll be surprised what sort of talent comes across your desk if you do have that open mindedness to what you're doing and what you're recruiting. Again, that, like you guys said earlier, I think that breeds more innovation, further advancement of your business. You may get different skill sets, different mindsets, which really drive things forward. Obviously, that's all going to play into what your plan is and how you want to move forward, but having that openness to it really does open your mind to different talent, different people.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of sectors could learn from that, couldn't they? And candidates could learn from that as well. You know, people would apply for more roles that they felt they could do, which they probably aren't applying for now because they just feel it's not within their remit or within their skills or qualifications. And maybe that opens up the workforce a little bit more and the more opportunity. But as you say, like the business might benefit because they might get something across their desk which is completely outside of their usual scope. Yeah. And that might just be a whole game changer in terms of what it is they're getting from that candidate. Maybe.
Yeah, I think there's some data out there which says males are more likely to do what you suggested and apply for stuff that's outside their realm, whereas females, unless they tick every bit on the job description and the experience, they will not apply. Right. So I suppose that open-mindedness from a business perspective and not being too prescripted on what you're looking for. Obviously, there's requirements of roles, and as I said, you want to fill the role to the best of their ability, and you want to have a plan and move forward. Yeah. But having that open-mindedness to, okay, we might see someone a bit different and see what we get, and vice versa from a candidate point of view. Don't be so that if you have that encouragement from the business, it makes it more open for the candidate to do it. But don't have that closed-mindedness that you can't do it. But I think a personal interaction, especially from my experience recruiting myself, a personal interaction of someone who's outside the realm of what I'm thinking and them bringing you and giving you a reason why, or I think I'm good for this role because of X, Y, and Z, will often tweak my thinking and think, oh, actually, they're probably right, I'll meet that person, and you meet them and then you get a bit more information out of them. But I think it's personal touches on both parts. Instead of a piece of paper doesn't give you everything you need to know. Yeah. There's more to that than, like, back to your point earlier, Rob, when someone asks you what do you like, what do you enjoy doing? You probably get more from that question than you do from tell us about how you put a formula together.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. Well, this has been really interesting. Yeah. Thanks for coming on the show. Really appreciate it, Joe. Joe Makin from Emerson Kitney. Thanks, Rob.
Thanks, Wayne. Thanks, Joe.
Cheers, guys.
See you all next time. Cheers.
Cheers.